The dust had barely settled on her husband's grave when the bank notice arrived, and Hannah Holloway knew she had 3 days to leave the only home she had ever known. She stood in the doorway of the small farmhouse outside San Antonio, Texas, gripping the paper so hard her knuckles turned white, watching the spring wind of 1878 tear through the fields she could no longer afford to keep. 23 years old, widowed after only 2 years of marriage, and now homeless with nothing but a small trunk of clothes, and the horse her late husband had bought at auction. The cholera outbreak had taken Daniel first, then swept through half the town before burning itself out. Hannah had nursed him through those final terrible days, held his hand as the fever consumed him, and somehow her own body had fought off the sickness. She had survived the disease only to discover that Daniel's gambling debts were far worse than she had imagined. The farm was forfeit. Everything was forfeit. She packed her belongings slowly, methodically, letting her hands move through the familiar motions while her mind struggled to form any kind of plan. Her parents were dead, gone in a wagon accident when she was 16. Her only sister had married a railroad man and moved to Chicago, and Hannah had no money for a train ticket, no money for anything at all. The horse, a sturdy chestnut mare named Penny, was all she had left, and even that she expected the bank might try to claim. But when the banker's son came to oversee her departure, he was a nervous young man who could barely meet her eyes. He watched her load her trunk onto the horse, his face flushed with embarrassment at his father's business. "I am sorry, Mrs. Holloway," he said quietly. "If it were up to me." "It is not," Hannah said, her voice steady though her heart was hammering. "And I harbor no ill will toward you personally, but your father could have given me more time." The young man nodded, looking miserable, and Hannah swung herself up onto Penny's back. She had grown up riding, one of the few skills her practical mother had insisted she learn, and she sat the horse with the easy confidence of long practice. Without another word, she turned Penny west and rode away from everything she had known. The first few days were the hardest. She had a little food, some dried beef and hardtack she had managed to save, but it would not last long. She avoided the main roads, fearful of bandits or worse, and made her way through the rough Texas terrain with only the sun to guide her. At night, she made small fires in protected hollows and slept with her back against a rock, Penny's reins looped around her wrist. She had no destination in mind, only a vague notion of heading west where she had heard land was still available, where a woman might find work or opportunity. The landscape grew rougher, more arid, as she traveled. The gentle rolling hills around San Antonio gave way to harder country, all rocks and scrub brush and endless blue sky. On the 5th day, her food ran out. On the 6th day, her water was nearly gone, and she had not seen a stream or settlement for miles. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly, and Hannah felt the first real fingers of fear clutching at her chest. She had survived her husband's death and the loss of her home, but she might not survive her own foolish flight into the wilderness. Penny stumbled on the rocky ground, and Hannah dismounted to spare the horse her weight. She walked alongside the mare, scanning the horizon desperately for any sign of water, any hint of human habitation. The land seemed to stretch forever in all directions, empty and indifferent to her survival. It was late afternoon when she saw the rider. He was far off, just a dark shape against the harsh landscape, but he was moving in her direction. Hannah's first instinct was to hide, to pull Penny behind an outcropping and wait for the stranger to pass. But she was so desperately thirsty, and if this person meant her harm, she was not sure she had the strength left to run anyway. She stood her ground and waited. As he drew closer, she could make out more details. He sat his horse with a relaxed ease, his wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the sun. He wore simple clothes, dark trousers and a faded blue shirt, and a bandana around his neck. A rifle rested across his saddle, but his hands were loose on the reins, not threatening. When he was perhaps 20 yards away, he reined in his horse and removed his hat. Hannah saw a man somewhere in his mid-20s, with dark hair that fell to his collar and a weathered, sunburned face. His eyes were a startling light blue, almost gray, and they studied her with a calm, assessing gaze. "Madam," he said, his voice quiet and measured, "you look like you could use some help." Hannah's pride wanted to refuse, but her parched throat made the decision for her. "I need water," she said, and hated how desperate she sounded. "I have been traveling for days, and I miscalculated the distance between settlements." The man nodded slowly and reached for a canteen tied to his saddle. He dismounted with an easy grace and walked toward her, holding out the water. "Drink slow," he said. "Your body is not used to it right now." Hannah took the canteen with shaking hands and forced herself to sip carefully, though she wanted to gulp it down. The water was warm, but it tasted like salvation, and she felt tears prick her eyes at the simple mercy of it. "Thank you," she managed. "You are a long way from anywhere," the man said, taking his canteen back when she had drunk her fill. "Where are you headed?" Hannah hesitated, then decided there was no point in lying. "I do not know exactly. West. I was told there might be work in Fort Davis or other towns in that direction." The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "Fort Davis is a good 150 miles from here, maybe more, and the route is not kind to a woman traveling alone." He looked at her horse, at her dusty clothes, and his expression remained neutral, non-judgmental. "What kind of work are you looking for?" "Any kind," Hannah said honestly. "I can cook, clean, so I can read and write and do figures. I can help with livestock if needed. I am not particular." He studied her for a long moment, those gray-blue eyes thoughtful. "My name is Fletcher Pine," he said finally. "I have a ranch about 10 miles south of here, closer to Fort Davis than you are now. It is not fancy, just me and a couple of hired hands, but we need someone who can cook. The food situation has been dire, if I am being honest. We have been trading off kitchen duty and none of us have much talent for it." Hannah felt a rush of hope, so intense it made her dizzy. "You are offering me work, if you want it," Fletcher said. "Room and board, and I can pay you $20 a month. It is hard work, cooking for ranch hands, and we are a rough bunch, but I promise you will be safe. I do not tolerate any man disrespecting a woman on my land." $20 a month was more than fair, more than generous, really. Hannah knew she should be suspicious, should question this sudden good fortune, but desperation had stripped away her caution. "I accept," she said, "and I thank you, Mr. Pine." "Just Fletcher is fine," he said, and there was the ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth. "Can you ride another 10 miles today, or would you rather rest first?" "I can ride," Hannah said firmly. She would have ridden 50 miles if it meant food and shelter and safety. Fletcher nodded and remounted his horse. "Follow me, then. We will take it slow for your mare's sake. She looks about done in." They rode in silence through the late afternoon, Fletcher setting an easy pace that Penny could manage. Hannah watched him from behind, noting the way he sat his horse, the way he seemed completely at home in this harsh landscape. He moved with a quiet confidence that spoke of years spent in the saddle, and she wondered what his story was, why a man in his 20s was running a ranch alone. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the land changed slightly. There was more grass here, proof of water somewhere nearby, and Hannah saw cattle scattered across a wide valley. In the distance, she could make out buildings, a main house, a barn, several smaller structures. "This is it," Fletcher said, the first words he had spoken in miles. "Not much to look at, but it is home." To Hannah, who had been homeless for nearly a week, it looked like paradise. The main house was a low adobe structure with a wide porch, simple but solid. Fletcher led her to the barn first, where they unsaddled the horses and rubbed them down. Hannah's arms ached from the work, but she forced herself to care for Penny properly, murmuring soft words to the tired horse. "She can stay in this stall," Fletcher said, carrying in fresh hay. "There is water in that trough, and I will bring feed in a moment." When the horses were settled, Fletcher showed her to the main house. Inside, it was sparse but clean, with a large main room that served as both kitchen and living area, and several doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. The kitchen had a good stove, a large table, and shelves stocked with basic supplies. "You can have the room at the end," Fletcher said, pointing to one of the doors. "It is not much, but the door has a lock if that makes you feel easier." The two ranch hands, Sam and Miguel, sleep in the bunkhouse out back. "They are good men, been with me for 3 years now. You will meet them at breakfast." Hannah nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion and relief. "When should I start cooking?" "Tomorrow is soon enough," Fletcher said. "I will fix something simple tonight. You need rest more than we need a good meal." He paused, then added quietly, "I am glad I found you out there, Mrs. I am sorry I did not catch your name." "Holloway," Hannah said. "Hannah Holloway, and I am glad you found me too, Fletcher." "More glad than I can say." That night, lying on a real bed for the first time in days, with a full stomach and the knowledge that she had a place to stay, Hannah allowed herself to cry. She cried for Daniel, for the life she had lost, for the fear and uncertainty of the past week. And then, finally, she cried from relief and exhaustion and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke to the sound of roosters and early morning light streaming through the small window. For a moment she was disoriented, then memory flooded back and she sat up quickly. She had work to do. Hannah dressed in her simplest work dress, tied her long brown hair back with a ribbon, and made her way to the kitchen. Fletcher was already there, standing by the stove with a coffee pot, and he turned when he heard her footsteps. "Morning," he said. "I did not want to wake you, but I am glad you are up. The men will be in soon, and they eat like they have been starving for weeks." "Then I had better get started," Hannah said, rolling up her sleeves. She moved to the pantry and began pulling out supplies, her mind already planning the meal. Bacon, eggs, biscuits, maybe some fried potatoes. Simple but hearty. Fletcher watched her work for a moment, then poured her a cup of coffee. "You look like you know what you are doing." "My mother taught me," Hannah said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "She said a woman who could cook well would never starve, and I suppose she was right." "I am sorry," Fletcher said quietly, "that you were in a position to test that theory." Hannah glanced at him, surprised by the compassion in his voice, but before she could respond, the door burst open and 2 men trooped in, bringing with them the smell of horses and hay. "Boss, are you actually cooking this morning, or should Miguel and I just chew on leather?" The speaker was a tall, lanky man with red hair and a broad, friendly face. He stopped short when he saw Hannah. "Well now, who might you be?" "This is Mrs. Holloway," Fletcher said before Hannah could answer. "She is our new cook, and you two will treat her with respect or answer to me." "Understood." "Yes, sir," the redhead said quickly, though his eyes sparkled with good humor. "Sam Brennan, madam, pleased to make your acquaintance. And this ugly fellow is Miguel Reyes." The other man, shorter and darker with a neat mustache, rolled his eyes at Sam but smiled at Hannah. "Do not listen to him, Senora. He talks too much, but his heart is good. Welcome to our humble ranch." Hannah found herself smiling despite her nervousness. "Thank you. Breakfast will be ready shortly if you gentlemen would like to wash up." The two ranch hands exchanged delighted looks and hurried to comply. Fletcher caught Hannah's eye, and there was that ghost of a smile again, barely visible but definitely there. "They are good men," he said quietly. "Rough around the edges but loyal. They will make you welcome here." And they did. Over the next few days, Hannah settled into a routine that felt almost like having a family again. She woke early to prepare breakfast, packed lunches for the men to take out on the range, and had dinner waiting when they returned in the evening. In between, she cleaned the house, mended clothes, and started a vegetable garden in a plot behind the kitchen. The work was hard but satisfying, and for the first time since Daniel's death, Hannah felt like she had a purpose again. The men were effusive in their praise of her cooking, especially compared to what they had been enduring, and they went out of their way to make her feel comfortable and safe. Fletcher, though, remained something of a mystery. He was always polite, always kind, but he kept a certain distance that Hannah found herself wanting to bridge. He spoke little about himself, though she learned from Sam and Miguel that he had inherited the ranch from his father 2 years ago, and had been working hard to build it into something profitable. "The boss is a good man," Sam told her one afternoon when she was hanging laundry and he had stopped by for water. "Quiet but fair. He works harder than any of us, and he never asks us to do something he would not do himself." "He seems very dedicated," Hannah said carefully. "That he is," Sam agreed. "Though I wish he would take a day off now and then. All work and no play makes a man dull, my mother used to say." Hannah laughed. "Wise woman." "She had her moments," Sam said with a grin. Then, more seriously, "We are all glad you are here, Mrs. Holloway. The place feels more like a home now, if you do not mind me saying." Hannah did not mind at all. In fact, she was beginning to feel the same way. 2 weeks into her employment, Fletcher asked her to ride out with him to check on some cattle in the far pasture. "I want to show you the boundaries of the ranch," he explained. "In case you ever need to ride out for any reason, it is good to know the land." They rode out together on a bright May morning, the sky impossibly blue overhead. Fletcher pointed out landmarks, explained which areas were safe and which were prone to flash floods during the summer rains. Hannah listened carefully, but she was also acutely aware of his presence beside her, the easy way he sat his horse, the quiet authority in his voice. "You have done well these past weeks," Fletcher said as they paused on a rise overlooking a small creek. "The men are happier, the house feels lived in. I want you to know I appreciate it." "I appreciate the opportunity," Hannah said honestly. "You saved my life, Fletcher." "I would have died out there if you had not found me." He shook his head slightly. "You would have survived. You strike me as someone who survives." "I have had to," Hannah said, and there was more bitterness in her voice than she intended. "I have had to survive a lot these past months." Fletcher was quiet for a moment, then said, "You do not have to talk about it if you do not want to, but if you ever need to, I am a good listener." Hannah looked at him, really looked at him, and saw genuine concern in those gray-blue eyes. On impulse, she found herself telling him everything, about Daniel's death, the farm, the debts, her desperate flight west. The words poured out of her in a rush, and to her embarrassment, tears followed. "I am sorry," she said, wiping at her eyes. "I did not mean to burden you with all of this." "It is not a burden," Fletcher said quietly. He reached out and briefly touched her hand, a gesture of comfort that sent an unexpected warmth through her. "You have been carrying that alone for too long. I am glad you told me." They sat in silence for a while, watching the cattle graze below. Then Fletcher said, "I lost my mother when I was 12. My father remarried a year later, a woman who had no patience for another woman's child. She made my life miserable for years until I was old enough to stand up to her. When my father died and left the ranch to me, she was furious. She took what money she could and left for California. I have not heard from her since." "I am sorry," Hannah said softly. "That must have been very difficult." "It was," Fletcher admitted. "But it taught me that home is not just a place. It is people who care about you, who see you for who you are. And I think maybe you and we have both been looking for that. For home." Hannah felt her breath catch. There was something in the way he was looking at her, something that made her heart beat faster. "Yes," she said. "I think you are right." Fletcher held her gaze for a long moment, then seemed to catch himself. He looked away, clearing his throat. "We should head back. There is a storm coming in later, and I want to make sure everything is secured." They rode back in a charged silence, and Hannah found her thoughts in turmoil. She had not expected to feel anything for anyone, not so soon after Daniel's death. But Fletcher was nothing like Daniel. Where her late husband had been impulsive and charming and ultimately irresponsible, Fletcher was steady and thoughtful and deeply reliable. And she was drawn to him in a way that both frightened and excited her. The storm Fletcher had predicted rolled in that evening with dramatic force, lightning splitting the sky and thunder shaking the house. Hannah finished cleaning up after dinner while the men secured the barn and brought the horses in. When Fletcher came back inside, he was soaked despite his rain slicker, water dripping from his hair. "That is quite a storm," Hannah said, handing him a towel. "We needed the rain," Fletcher said, drying his face. "But I could have done without the lightning. I always worry about the cattle in weather like this. Sam and Miguel are checking on them. They will do a quick run, yes, but they will not be long." Fletcher hesitated, then added, "Would you like some coffee? I am too keyed up to sleep yet." Hannah nodded, and they sat at the kitchen table with their coffee while the storm raged outside. They talked about small things at first: the ranch, the garden Hannah was planting, the new foal that had been born the previous week. But gradually the conversation deepened, and Hannah found herself telling Fletcher about her childhood, her dreams, the life she had imagined for herself before reality intruded. "What did you want to be?" Fletcher asked. "If you could have been anything." Hannah laughed softly. "You will think it silly." "I will not." "I wanted to be a teacher," Hannah admitted. "I loved learning, loved reading. My father had a small collection of books, and I read them over and over. I thought it would be wonderful to help children learn to read, to open up that world for them." "That is not silly at all," Fletcher said. "It is a good dream, an honorable one." "But not very practical for a farmer's daughter," Hannah said with a shrug. "My parents needed me to help with the farm, and then Daniel came along, and that was that." "Did you love him?" Fletcher asked quietly. "Your husband?" Hannah considered the question carefully. "I thought I did at the time. He was exciting, full of grand plans and big dreams. But looking back, I think I was more in love with the idea of being in love than with Daniel himself. He was not a bad man, just irresponsible. And I enabled that, I think, by always trying to fix his mistakes." "You were very young," Fletcher said. "We all make mistakes when we are young." "What about you?" Hannah asked. "Have you ever been in love?" Fletcher was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "Once. I thought I was, anyway. Her name was Catherine, and she was the daughter of a rancher over near El Paso. We courted for about 6 months, and I was ready to ask her to marry me. But when she met my stepmother, saw how difficult the situation was, she decided she did not want to be part of it. She married a banker's son instead." "I am sorry," Hannah said sincerely. Fletcher smiled, but it did not quite reach his eyes. "It was for the best, I think. She wanted comfort and security, and I could not promise her that, not then. And if she had truly loved me, she would not have let my stepmother scare her off. True love should be stronger than obstacles," Hannah said. "Yes," Fletcher agreed, looking directly at her. It should be. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities, and Hannah felt her cheeks flush. Before either of them could say anything more, the door burst open and Sam and Miguel rushed in, shaking off water like wet dogs. "Everything secure, boss," Sam reported. "Cattle are nervous but safe. We lost a fence post in the east pasture, though. We will need to fix that tomorrow." The moment was broken, and Hannah excused herself to go to bed. But as she lay in her room, listening to the rain hammer against the roof, she could not stop thinking about Fletcher, about the way he had looked at her, the things he had said. She was developing feelings for him, real and deep feelings, and she did not know what to do about it. The next morning dawned clear and fresh, the storm having washed away the dust and heat. Hannah threw herself into her work, trying to ignore the confusing tangle of emotions in her chest. But she was acutely aware of Fletcher's presence whenever he was nearby, the sound of his voice, the rare flash of his smile. Days turned into weeks, and Hannah's life at the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. She grew close to Sam and Miguel, who treated her like a beloved sister, teasing her gently and always making sure she felt included. The garden she had planted began to thrive, providing fresh vegetables for their meals, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, she and Fletcher drew closer. It was nothing dramatic, just small moments of connection, his hand brushing hers as she passed him a plate at dinner. The way his eyes sought her out when he came in from the range. Long conversations in the evening after the other men had gone to bed, talking about everything and nothing. One evening in late June, after a particularly long day of work, Fletcher found Hannah sitting on the porch watching the sunset. She had been thinking about Daniel, remembering the day they had buried him, and there were tears on her cheeks. "Are you all right?" Fletcher asked, sitting down beside her. "I was just thinking about my husband," Hannah said honestly. "It has been almost 6 months since he died. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago, and sometimes it feels like yesterday. Grief is strange that way," Fletcher said. "It does not follow any kind of schedule or logic." "Do you think it is wrong?" Hannah asked, turning to look at him. "That I am happy here, that I feel more alive now than I did in the last year of my marriage. No," Fletcher said firmly. "I do not think it is wrong at all. You deserve to be happy, Hannah. You deserve to live, not just survive." Hannah felt fresh tears spring to her eyes, but these were different. "You called me Hannah." Fletcher looked startled, then smiled slightly. "I did. I hope that is all right. Mrs. Holloway feels too formal now." "It is more than all right," Hannah said softly. "I like the way you say it." They sat in silence for a while, watching as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue. Finally, Fletcher said, "Hannah, I need to tell you something. I have been trying to find the right words for weeks now, but there is no perfect way to say it, so I am just going to speak plain." Hannah's heart began to pound. "All right." "I have feelings for you," Fletcher said, his voice quiet but steady. "Deep feelings. I know it might be too soon, and I know you are still grieving your husband, but I cannot keep pretending that what I feel is just friendship or employer concern. You have become important to me, more important than anyone has been in a very long time, and I needed you to know that." Hannah stared at him, her mind racing. Everything she had been feeling, all the confusion and attraction and hope, crystallized into a single clear certainty. "It is not too soon," she said. "And I have feelings for you too, Fletcher. I did not expect to, I did not plan for it, but I do. You make me feel safe and valued and seen in a way I never have before, and that terrifies me, but it also makes me happier than I thought I could be." Fletcher reached out and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I do not want to rush you. We can take this as slow as you need. But I want you to know that my intentions are serious. I am not playing games, Hannah. When I care about someone, I care deeply and for the long term." "I know," Hannah said, squeezing his hand. "That is one of the things I admire most about you. You are steady and true, and I need that. I have had enough chaos and uncertainty to last a lifetime." Fletcher lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Then we will build something steady together, something real and lasting." They sat on the porch long into the night, talking about their hopes and fears, their pasts and their possible future. And when Fletcher finally walked Hannah to her door, he kissed her forehead softly and told her good night. Hannah lay in bed that night feeling like her entire world had shifted on its axis. 6 months ago she had been a desperate widow with nowhere to go. Now she had a home, work she enjoyed, friends who cared about her, and a man who loved her. It felt like a miracle, like more than she deserved. But over the following weeks, Fletcher proved again and again that she did deserve it. He courted her with a quiet determination, bringing her wildflowers from the range, sitting with her in the evenings, helping her with the heavier chores. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, but he made his feelings abundantly clear. Sam and Miguel noticed the change between them and were delighted. "About time, boss," Sam said one morning when he caught Fletcher watching Hannah with undisguised affection. "We have been wondering when you would make your move." "Mind your own business," Fletcher said, but there was no heat in it. "Just saying we approve," Miguel added with a grin. "She is good for you, you smile more now." It was true. Hannah had noticed it too. Fletcher seemed lighter, happier, more at ease with himself. And she knew it was not just because of her. It was because he had finally allowed himself to hope for something beyond just surviving and building his ranch. In August, a traveling preacher came through the area, and the small community around Fort Davis gathered for a Sunday service. Fletcher asked Hannah if she would like to attend with him, and she agreed readily. It would be her first real outing in the community, her first time meeting the neighboring ranchers and townspeople as something more than just Fletcher's cook. She wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and pinned her hair up carefully. When she emerged from her room, Fletcher was waiting by the door, and the look on his face made her breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," Hannah said, feeling her cheeks warm. "You look very handsome yourself." The service was held in a large barn that served as a community gathering place. There were perhaps 50 people in attendance, families and ranchers and townspeople, all dressed in their Sunday best. Hannah felt nervous walking in on Fletcher's arm, aware of the curious glances and whispered conversations. But Fletcher introduced her to everyone with obvious pride, his hand at the small of her back, and people were welcoming. Several women invited her to join a quilting circle that met monthly, and a few of the neighboring ranchers' wives made a point of telling her how glad they were that Fletcher had found someone. "He has been alone too long," one older woman said kindly. "It is good to see him happy." After the service, there was a potluck meal, and Hannah was gratified to see people enjoying the dishes she had prepared. Fletcher stayed close to her side, and she appreciated his steadying presence as she navigated these new social waters. They were eating under a large oak tree when a well-dressed man in his 40s approached. "Fletcher Pine," the man said, extending his hand. "Good to see you. I heard you had hired a cook, but I did not realize she was such a charming addition to our community." "Mr. Garrett," Fletcher said, shaking his hand though his tone was noticeably cooler. "This is Hannah Holloway. Hannah, this is Thomas Garrett. He owns the largest ranch in the area." "Pleased to meet you," Hannah said politely, though something about the way Garrett was looking at her made her uncomfortable. "The pleasure is mine," Garrett said smoothly. "Tell me, Mrs. Holloway, are you widowed? Forgive my directness, but I like to know who my neighbors are." I am, Hannah said, bristling slightly at his presumption. How tragic, Garrett said, though he did not sound particularly sympathetic. And now you work for Fletcher here. That must be quite an adjustment, going from running your own household to cooking for ranch hands. I am grateful for the work, Hannah said evenly, and Fletcher has been very kind to me. I am sure he has, Garrett said, his tone implying something unpleasant. Fletcher has always had a soft heart, sometimes too soft for his own good. Fletcher's jaw tightened. Was there something you wanted, Garrett? Just making conversation, Garrett said easily. Though I did want to mention that I am still interested in buying that northern section of your land. The offer stands if you change your mind. I will not, Fletcher said flatly. That land has been in my family for 30 years. It is not for sale. Garrett shrugged. Suit yourself. But if you ever find yourself in financial difficulty, you know where to find me. His eyes slid to Hannah. It was a pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Holloway. I hope we will see more of each other. He walked away, and Fletcher let out a long breath. I apologize for that. Garrett is always trying to expand his holdings, and he does not take no for an answer gracefully. He made you angry, Hannah observed. He implied something disrespectful about you and me, Fletcher said, his voice tight. I do not appreciate that. Hannah touched his arm gently. I know what we are to each other. His implications do not matter to me. Fletcher covered her hand with his. They matter to me. I want everyone to know that you are here by your own choice, that I treat you with the respect you deserve, and that my feelings for you are honorable. They do know that, Hannah assured him. Anyone who speaks with us for 5 minutes can see it. The encounter with Garrett left a sour note on an otherwise lovely day, but Hannah refused to let it ruin her mood. On the ride back to the ranch, she and Fletcher talked about the people they had met, and she felt more than ever that she was building a life here, putting down roots. That night, after Sam and Miguel had gone to the bunkhouse, Fletcher and Hannah sat on the porch as had become their habit. The summer night was warm and full of cricket song, and Hannah felt utterly content. Hannah, Fletcher said after a long, comfortable silence. I have been thinking about something, and I want your honest answer, of course. How would you feel about staying here permanently, not as my cook but as my wife? Hannah's heart stopped, then started again at double speed. Are you asking me to marry you? Yes, Fletcher said, turning to face her fully. I know we have not been courting very long by conventional standards, but I am sure of my feelings. I love you, Hannah. I love your strength and your kindness and your resilience. I love the way you have made this house a home. I love talking to you, being near you, seeing you smile, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you will have me. Hannah felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears. Yes, she said, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, Fletcher, I will marry you. I love you too, more than I thought I could love anyone. You saved my life in more ways than one, and I cannot imagine my future without you in it. Fletcher pulled her into his arms and kissed her, a kiss that was tender and passionate and full of promise. Hannah kissed him back, pouring all her feelings into it, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. I do not have a ring yet, Fletcher said, his forehead resting against hers. But I will get you one, the finest one I can afford. I do not need a ring, Hannah said. I just need you. You will have both, Fletcher promised, and everything else I can give you. They sat wrapped in each other's arms for a long time, making plans and dreaming about their future together. They decided to marry in the fall, after the busy summer season was over, and to have the wedding at the ranch with their friends and neighbors in attendance. Sam and Miguel were overjoyed when Fletcher told them the news the next morning. I knew it, Sam crowed. I told Miguel you were going to propose soon. He owes me $5. You bet on us, Hannah asked, torn between amusement and exasperation. "Only because we were certain the boss would make the right choice," Miguel said with a grin. "Congratulations to you both. This is wonderful news." Word of the engagement spread quickly through the community, and Hannah found herself on the receiving end of much goodwill and many well wishes. The women from the quilting circle invited her to a special meeting and presented her with a beautiful quilt they had made, featuring a pattern called Wedding Ring. "Every bride needs something special for her new home," one of them said kindly. "And we wanted you to know how happy we are to have you as part of our community." Hannah was deeply moved by the gesture, and she found herself forming real friendships with these women, bonds that went beyond politeness or necessity. The only person who seemed less than pleased by the engagement was Thomas Garrett. He made a point of visiting the ranch a few weeks after the announcement, ostensibly to congratulate Fletcher, but really to make another pitch for the northern land. "You will be a married man soon," Garrett said, his tone falsely jovial. "With responsibilities and potentially children, that land could fetch a good price, give you a nice cushion for the future." "The land stays," Fletcher said firmly. "And I would appreciate it if you did not use my upcoming marriage as a reason to pressure me into selling." Garrett's smile did not reach his eyes. "Just trying to be helpful. Marriage can be expensive, and your little ranch here, while charming, is not exactly profitable yet." "We are doing fine," Fletcher said coldly, "and I think you should leave now." After Garrett rode away, Fletcher was tense and angry. Hannah brought him coffee and sat beside him on the porch steps. "Why does he want that land so badly?" she asked. "There is a creek that runs through it," Fletcher explained. "Good water, year-round. If he owned that land, he would control a significant water source in this area, which would give him leverage over the smaller ranchers. It is not just about the land itself, it is about power." "And you will not sell because it is your family's legacy," Hannah said. "That, and because I do not like bullies," Fletcher said. "My father taught me to stand up for what is right, even when it is hard." "Garrett represents everything I despise: greed, manipulation, the willingness to crush smaller people to get what he wants." Hannah took his hand. "Then we will stand together against him. Whatever comes, we face it together." Fletcher squeezed her hand gratefully. "I do not deserve you." "Yes, you do," Hannah said firmly. "And I am going to spend the rest of our lives proving it to you." As summer faded into fall, preparations for the wedding kicked into high gear. Hannah sewed herself a simple but elegant dress in cream-colored silk that one of the townswomen had given her as a gift. Fletcher ordered a new suit from a tailor in Fort Davis, and Sam and Miguel cleaned and decorated the barn where the ceremony would take place. The night before the wedding, Hannah lay awake thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, she had been watching her husband die, helpless to save him. 6 months ago, she had been homeless and desperate, riding into the wilderness with no plan and no hope. And now she was about to marry a man she loved deeply, a man who valued her and respected her and made her laugh. She had survived it all, just as Fletcher had said she would. And in surviving, she had found something she had not expected: a true home, not just a place but a person who saw her completely and loved her anyway. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, a perfect October morning with just a hint of coolness in the air. Hannah dressed with help from her new friends, pinning her hair up and securing a simple veil. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the confident, happy woman staring back at her. The ceremony was held in the barn as planned, with the traveling preacher officiating and what seemed like half the county in attendance. Hannah walked down the makeshift aisle on Sam's arm since she had no family to give her away, and when she saw Fletcher waiting for her at the front, her breath caught. He looked impossibly handsome in his new suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes locked on her with an intensity that made her knees weak. When she reached him, he took her hand and smiled, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was making the right choice. The ceremony itself was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged vows in steady voices, promising to love and honor and cherish each other for the rest of their lives. Fletcher slid a simple gold band onto her finger, and she did the same for him. And when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Fletcher kissed her in front of everyone, a kiss that was both chaste and deeply intimate. The celebration afterward was joyous, with food and music and dancing. Hannah found herself swept from one conversation to another, accepting congratulations and well wishes. But her eyes kept finding Fletcher across the room, and every time their gazes met, she felt a thrill of joy and anticipation. As evening fell and the guests began to depart, Sam and Miguel made themselves scarce with exaggerated tact, heading to the bunkhouse and promising not to return until noon the next day. Fletcher and Hannah were left alone in the house that was now truly their home. "Are you happy?" Fletcher asked, pulling her into his arms. "More than I ever thought I could be," Hannah said honestly. "This day was perfect. You are perfect." "Not perfect," Fletcher said with a soft laugh, "but trying my best for you." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Hannah felt desire curl through her. She had been married before, but this felt completely different. With Daniel, there had been passion but not much tenderness. With Fletcher, there was both, a combination that made her feel cherished and desired in equal measure. They made their way to the bedroom that was now theirs to share, and Fletcher was patient and gentle, making sure Hannah felt comfortable and loved. The intimacy they shared that night was everything she had hoped for and more, a physical expression of the emotional connection they had built over the past months. Afterward, lying in Fletcher's arms with her head on his chest, Hannah felt a profound sense of peace. This was what love was supposed to be, she realized. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but quiet moments of connection, the steady presence of someone who truly understood you. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Fletcher said, kissing the top of her head. "And I will love you every day for the rest of our lives." The first few months of their marriage were blissful. Hannah reveled in the freedom to show her affection openly, to kiss Fletcher whenever she wanted, to share his bed and his dreams. They worked side by side during the day and talked for hours each evening, never running out of things to say to each other. In December, Hannah realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had not wanted to say anything until she was certain. When she finally told Fletcher, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, then immediately set her down and apologized for being too rough. "Are you happy?" Hannah asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy?" Fletcher repeated incredulously. "Hannah, I am overjoyed. A baby, our baby. This is the best news I could have imagined." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach, his expression full of wonder. "You are going to be an amazing mother." "And you will be an amazing father," Hannah said, covering his hand with hers. They told Sam and Miguel that evening, and the two ranch hands were thrilled. "A baby!" Sam exclaimed. "This calls for a celebration." Miguel immediately began planning, talking about how they would need to build a crib and baby-proof the house and teach the child to ride as soon as he or she was old enough. "The baby is not even born yet," Hannah laughed. "We have time." But she appreciated their enthusiasm and their obvious affection for the child who was on the way. The winter passed peacefully, and as Hannah's pregnancy progressed, Fletcher became increasingly protective. He insisted she not do any heavy lifting, took over more of the cooking when she was tired, and generally fussed over her in a way that was both endearing and occasionally exasperating. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Hannah reminded him one evening when he tried to insist she stay in bed because she had mentioned feeling tired. "I know," Fletcher said, "but you are carrying the most precious thing in the world to me, our child. Let me take care of you, Hannah, please." How could she argue with that? So she let him pamper her, and she tried to enjoy the special attention even when she felt perfectly fine. In early March, when the first wildflowers were beginning to bloom, Thomas Garrett made another appearance at the ranch. This time he brought bad news. "There has been an incident," he said without preamble. "Some of my cattle were rustled last night and the trail led through your northern section." Fletcher's expression hardened. "Are you accusing me of rustling your cattle?" "Of course not," Garrett said smoothly. "But the thieves clearly used your land to move the herd. I am afraid I am going to have to insist on access to that property to track them down." "No," Fletcher said flatly. "You know as well as I do that anyone could have driven cattle across that land. It does not mean the trail will lead anywhere useful, and I am not giving you an excuse to survey my property." "Your refusal is noted," Garrett said, his tone turning cold. "But you should know that the sheriff is very interested in this case. He may have questions for you." After Garrett left, Fletcher was furious. "He is up to something. I do not believe for a minute that cattle were rustled. This is another ploy to get access to that land." "What can we do?" Hannah asked, worried. "Tell the truth and hope the sheriff is an honest man," Fletcher said grimly. Sure enough, the sheriff arrived 2 days later, a grizzled man in his 50s named Hank Morrison. He questioned Fletcher about his whereabouts the night of the alleged rustling, asked about the northern section of land, and generally poked around with the demeanor of someone doing his job but not particularly enjoying it. "I will be straight with you, Pine," Morrison said finally. "I think Garrett is full of hot air. I have known him for years, and he has a history of crying wolf when he does not get his way, but I have to investigate all claims, especially when they involve theft." "I understand," Fletcher said, "and I have nothing to hide. I was here all night, and my wife and Hans can confirm that." Morrison nodded, tipped his hat to Hannah, and rode off. Fletcher hoped that would be the end of it, but he had a nagging feeling that Garrett was not done causing trouble. He was right. Over the next few weeks, small things began to go wrong at the ranch. Fences were cut, allowing cattle to wander. Feed was contaminated, forcing Fletcher to throw out valuable supplies. Tools went missing, only to turn up damaged days later. Fletcher suspected Garrett was behind it, hiring men to sabotage the ranch, but he had no proof. He increased security, had Sam and Miguel take turns keeping watch at night, and tried to keep the problems from Hannah, who was now 7 months pregnant and did not need the added stress. But Hannah noticed his worry and confronted him one evening. "Something is wrong. Tell me what is happening." Fletcher hesitated, then decided she deserved the truth. He explained about the sabotage, his suspicions about Garrett, and his frustration at not being able to prove anything. "We need to catch whoever is doing this in the act," Hannah said firmly. "Set a trap." "I have been thinking the same thing," Fletcher admitted, "but I worry about the risk." "We cannot just let this continue," Hannah argued. "It is our home, our livelihood, our future. We have to fight for it." Fletcher looked at his wife, heavily pregnant but fierce and determined, and felt a surge of love and pride. "All right. We set a trap, but you stay in the house where it is safe. I will not risk you or the baby." They made their plans carefully. Fletcher, Sam, and Miguel set up a watch schedule that made it look like they were following their usual routine, but actually left certain areas of the ranch more vulnerable than usual. Then they hid and waited. It took 3 nights, but their patience was rewarded. Just after midnight on the 3rd night, 3 men rode onto the property and headed straight for the feed storage. Fletcher and his men watched from hiding as the intruders began tampering with the feed sacks, clearly intending to ruin them. "Now," Fletcher said quietly, and they moved in together. The fight was brief but intense. The saboteurs, caught red-handed, tried to flee, but Fletcher and his men cut them off. There were a few thrown punches, and Miguel took a blow to the ribs, but in the end, all 3 men were subdued and tied up. "Who hired you?" Fletcher demanded. One of the men, a scruffy character with a gap-toothed grin, just laughed. "You know who, but you will never prove it." Fletcher sent Sam to fetch the sheriff while he and Miguel stood guard over the prisoners. When Morrison arrived, he took statements and hauled the 3 men away to jail. "I will question them thoroughly," Morrison promised. "If Garrett is behind this, I will get one of them to talk." He was as good as his word. 2 days later, he returned with news. One of the men cracked. "Admitted that Garrett hired them to cause you trouble, hoping to force you into financial difficulty so you would have to sell. I arrested Garrett this morning." "Will he go to prison?" Fletcher asked. "That depends on the judge," Morrison said. "But even if he does not, his reputation is ruined. People do not take kindly to this kind of underhanded dealing. He will be lucky if he does not lose half his business." It was vindication, but Fletcher took no pleasure in it. He was just relieved that the threat was over and his family would be safe. Hannah went into labor on a warm evening in late May, almost exactly a year after she had arrived at the ranch. Fletcher sent Miguel racing for the midwife while he stayed with Hannah, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Fletcher was terrified, remembering his mother's death in childbirth. But Hannah was strong, and with the midwife's skilled assistance, she delivered a healthy baby boy just before dawn. When the midwife placed the squalling infant in Fletcher's arms, he felt something inside him break open with overwhelming love. The baby was tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn blue like his father's. "He is beautiful," Fletcher said, his voice choked with emotion, "just like his mother." Hannah, exhausted but glowing, reached for their son. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but had not quite settled on one. Now, looking at the baby, Fletcher knew. "James. After my father. James Pine." "James," Hannah repeated, smiling. "It is perfect." Sam and Miguel were enchanted with baby James, falling over themselves to help in any way they could. Sam carved a beautiful wooden cradle, and Miguel's wife, whom he had recently brought to the ranch, knitted tiny sweaters and blankets. Fletcher was a devoted father from the start, taking turns walking the floor with James at night, changing diapers without complaint, and spending every free moment simply holding his son. Hannah watched him with her heart full, marveling at how gentle this strong, capable man could be with their tiny child. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Fletcher's hard work was paying off, and they were able to hire more help, expand their herd, and build a second barn. The northern section that Garrett had coveted so desperately remained in Pine hands, and Fletcher built a small cabin there that they used for overnight trips when checking on the cattle. On James's second birthday, as they celebrated with cake and friends, Hannah stood on the porch watching Fletcher play with their son in the yard. Sam and Miguel were there, along with several neighboring families, and the air was full of laughter and joy. She thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago, desperate and homeless, riding into the wilderness with no hope. That woman had been broken by loss and hardship, convinced she had nothing left to live for. But she had survived, and in surviving, she had found something she had not even known to look for. She had found love, real and deep and lasting. She had found a partner who treated her as an equal, who valued her thoughts and her feelings, who made her laugh and held her when she cried. She had found friends who were like family, a community that welcomed her, and work that gave her purpose. Most of all, she had found home. Not a place, though she loved the ranch and everything in it, but a sense of belonging, of being exactly where she was meant to be. Fletcher had been right that day on the rise overlooking the creek. Home was not just a place. It was people who cared about you, who saw you for who you truly were and loved you anyway. And Fletcher, quiet and steady Fletcher, had given her that. He had called this ranch home, and in doing so, he had given her a home too. Not just the physical structure, but the intangible feeling of safety and love and acceptance that made a house into something more. Fletcher caught her watching him and smiled, that rare, full smile that lit up his entire face. He said something to James, and the little boy toddled over to her, arms outstretched. Hannah scooped him up, kissing his chubby cheek, and Fletcher joined them on the porch, wrapping his arms around both of them. "Happy?" he asked, the same question he had asked on their wedding day. "More than I ever dreamed possible," Hannah said, and it was the absolute truth. Life was not perfect. There were still hard days, challenges to overcome, worries to face. But they faced them together, and that made all the difference. 2 years later, Hannah gave birth to a daughter they named Emily. And then 2 years after that, another son they called Daniel, in honor of Hannah's first husband. Fletcher had suggested it, saying that Daniel deserved to be remembered, and Hannah had loved him even more for his generosity of spirit. The children grew up surrounded by love and laughter, learning to ride almost before they could walk, helping with ranch chores and listening to stories around the fireplace in the evening. James inherited his father's quiet steadiness. Emily had her mother's fierce determination, and little Daniel was curious about everything, always asking questions and exploring. Sam eventually married a school teacher from Fort Davis, and Miguel's family grew to include 3 children of their own. The ranch became a hub of activity, no longer just Fletcher's isolated outpost, but a thriving community of its own. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Fletcher took Hannah back to the rise where they had first really talked, where she had told him about losing Daniel and the farm, and where he had said that home was people who cared about you. They sat on their horses looking out over the land they had built together, land that would pass to their children and their children's children. The ranch was prosperous now, well respected in the region, and they had added to the original holdings, buying adjacent properties as they became available. "You remember what I said to you here?" Fletcher asked. "You said I would have survived even without your help," Hannah said. "And that home is not just a place." "I was right about the second part," Fletcher said, "but wrong about the first. I do not think either of us would have truly survived without the other, not just existed but really lived. You made my life worth living, Hannah. You gave me a reason to build something beyond just a ranch. You gave me a family, a future, a home in every sense of the word." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes, though they were happy tears. "You saved my life in so many ways. You gave me hope when I had none, love when I thought I would never feel it again, and a purpose beyond just getting through each day. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I did not think that was possible." Fletcher dismounted and helped Hannah down from her horse. They stood together on the rise, arms around each other, looking out at the life they had built. "I would do it all again," Fletcher said quietly. "Every struggle, every challenge, every moment of fear or uncertainty, because it all led to this, to us, to our family. And I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," Hannah said. "Not one single thing." They rode back to the ranch as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. When they arrived, Their children ran out to meet them, James lifting Emily onto his shoulders while Daniel showed them a bird's nest he had found. Sam and Miguel waved from the barn, and the smell of dinner cooking drifted from the house. This, Hannah thought, was what it meant to be home. Not the walls or the roof or the land, important as those were, but the people, the love, the sense of belonging that filled every corner of this place. She had survived it all, every hardship and loss and moment of despair, and she had found what she had not expected. She had found Fletcher, quiet and steady, a man who loved with his whole heart and never wavered. And he had quietly called this place home, but in doing so, he had made it home for her too in every way that mattered. As they walked into the house together, surrounded by their children and the life they had created, Hannah felt a profound sense of gratitude and peace. The past was behind her, with all its pain and loss. The future stretched ahead, full of promise and possibility. And the present, this perfect moment, was everything she had ever wanted and more than she had ever dared to dream. She had survived it all, and in surviving, she had found not just a place to live, but a reason to thrive. She had found love, family, purpose, and home. And as Fletcher took her hand and smiled at her across the dinner table, surrounded by the noise and chaos of their beautiful family, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be, now and forever. The years continued to unfold with their natural rhythm of seasons and celebrations, challenges and triumphs. The ranch grew more prosperous with each passing year, and Fletcher's reputation as a fair and honorable man spread throughout the region. He was often called upon to mediate disputes between neighbors or to give advice on ranching matters, and he served for a term as a county commissioner, working to improve roads and schools in the area. Hannah became known as much for her kindness as for her excellent cooking. She opened their home to anyone who needed help, whether it was a family whose crops had failed or a widow who needed a place to stay while getting back on her feet. She organized the women of the community to create a lending library in Fort Davis and taught reading to several adults who had never learned as children. Their children flourished. James grew into a young man of serious disposition and strong principles, much like his father. At 19, he was already taking on significant responsibility at the ranch, and Fletcher knew the land would be in good hands when he eventually passed it on. Emily, at 17, was fierce and independent, with dreams of becoming a doctor, an ambition her parents fully supported even though it was unusual for a woman. And Daniel, at 15, had his mother's curiosity and his father's steadiness, always mediating between his older siblings when they disagreed. On a spring morning in 1893, 15 years after their wedding, Hannah woke to find Fletcher already awake, watching her with the same intense affection he had shown from the beginning. "Good morning," she said, smiling at him. "You are staring." "I like looking at you," Fletcher said simply. "After all these years, I still cannot quite believe you are mine." Hannah laughed and moved closer to him. "I am definitely yours, just as you are definitely mine. We come as a set now." "The best set I could ask for," Fletcher said, kissing her softly. They rose and dressed, making their way to the kitchen where the family was already gathering for breakfast. This was Hannah's favorite time of day, when they were all together before the demands of the ranch scattered them in different directions. "Mother, Father," James said as they entered, "I wanted to talk to you both about something." "Of course," Fletcher said, pouring coffee for himself and Hannah. "What is on your mind?" "I have been thinking about building my own house," James said, "on the eastern section near the creek. I know I am still young, but I am courting Sarah Mitchell, and if things go as I hope, I would like to propose to her soon. I want to be able to offer her a proper home." Hannah felt her heart swell with pride and a touch of bittersweet emotion. Her eldest child, ready to start his own family. "Sarah is a lovely girl," she said, "and you have my blessing to propose when you are ready." "Mine too," Fletcher added, "and we can start on the house whenever you want. It is a good location and you should have your own space to build your life." James's face lit up with relief and joy. "Thank you, both of you. I want to do this right, the way you taught me." Over the following months, Fletcher and James worked together to build the new house, with help from Miguel and Sam and several of the other ranch hands. It was hard work but satisfying, and Fletcher found himself reflecting on how his own father had taught him to build, skills he was now passing to his son. Hannah spent time with Sarah, welcoming her into the family and helping her learn the skills she would need as a rancher's wife. She saw much of herself in the young woman, who was practical and hardworking but also had a dreamer's soul. When James proposed and Sarah accepted, there was great celebration. The wedding was set for the fall, and preparations began immediately. This time, Hannah was the one helping to plan and organize, offering advice and support to the young bride. The wedding was beautiful, held at the ranch just as Hannah and Fletcher's had been. And when Hannah watched James and Sarah exchange vows, she found herself crying happy tears. Fletcher squeezed her hand, understanding without words the mixture of joy and nostalgia she was feeling. "Our son is a man now," he murmured. "A good man." "Because he had a good father," Hannah whispered back. Life settled into a new pattern with James and Sarah living in their own house, but still very much part of the ranch family. Within a year, they welcomed their first child, a girl they named Hannah after her grandmother, and Fletcher and Hannah found themselves adjusting to the role of grandparents. "We are getting old," Fletcher joked one evening as they played with baby Hannah on the porch. "Speak for yourself," Hannah retorted, but she smiled. They were in their 40s now, their hair showing threads of gray, their bodies bearing the marks of years of hard work. But they were healthy and strong, and they had built a life that continued to bring them joy every single day. Emily eventually went east to attend a women's medical college, one of the first in the country to accept female students. It was hard to let her go, but Hannah and Fletcher were immensely proud of her courage and determination. She wrote home regularly, her letters full of excitement about her studies and the city life she was experiencing. Daniel took over more of the ranch responsibilities, as James focused on his growing family and his own section of land. He proved to have a natural gift for working with horses, and he began breeding and training them, adding a new dimension to the ranch's business. Through it all, Hannah and Fletcher remained at the center, the steady foundation upon which their family was built. They still took time for themselves, riding out to their favorite spots on the ranch, sitting on the porch in the evenings talking about their day, making love with the passion and tenderness that had never dimmed. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the porch they had sat on countless times over the years, Fletcher said, "Do you ever think about that day I found you in the wilderness? How different everything would be if I had ridden a different direction, or if you had chosen a different route?" "Sometimes," Hannah admitted, "but I think we were meant to find each other, Fletcher. I believe that with all my heart. All the pain and loss I endured before, it was leading me to you. And every good thing that has happened since has been because you saw me when I needed to be seen, and you offered me a chance to build something new." "You did the building," Fletcher said. "I just provided the location. You took a lonely ranch house and turned it into a home. You took a solitary man and gave him a family. Everything good in my life flows from you, Hannah." "And everything good in mine flows from you," Hannah said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We built this together, Fletcher. The ranch, the family, the life. It is ours, shared and equal. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear James and Sarah settling their children for the night, the sound of laughter and soft voices carrying on the evening air. Daniel was in the barn, tending to the horses he loved. And Emily, though far away, was part of them still, her spirit and determination a reflection of the values they had instilled. "I want you to know something," Fletcher said after a long while. "If I could go back and change anything, erase any hardship or struggle, I would not. Because every single thing that happened led to this moment, to us, to our family, and I would not trade this life for anything in the world." Hannah felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy, of gratitude for the life they had built together. "I feel the same way. Every single thing, even the worst moments, were worth it because they brought me here to you, to this life we have created." Fletcher wiped her tears away gently and kissed her, a kiss that still held the same passion and promise it had when they were young. And in that kiss, in that moment, Hannah felt the truth of what they had built together. She had survived it all, every loss and hardship and moment of despair. She had ridden into the wilderness alone and afraid, and she had found what she had not expected. She had found love, deep and true and lasting. She had found purpose and meaning and joy. She had found family and community and belonging. And Fletcher, quiet and steady Fletcher, had quietly called this place home. But in doing so, he had given her more than just a place to live. He had given her a reason to thrive, a future to build toward, and a love that would sustain her through whatever challenges life might bring. As they rose to go inside, hand in hand as they had been for 20 years, Hannah looked around at the ranch that had become her sanctuary, her haven, her home in every sense of the word. And she knew, with the deep certainty that comes from lived experience, that this was exactly where she was meant to be. She had survived it all, and in surviving, she had found everything she had ever needed. And the cowboy who had found her that day in the wilderness, desperate and alone, had quietly called it home. And so it was, and so it would always be, for as long as they both lived and beyond, in the legacy they would leave to their children and their children's children. This was home. This was love. This was the life they had built together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment at a time. And it was more beautiful and meaningful than anything Hannah could have imagined on that desperate day when she had ridden away from everything she knew. She had survived it all. She had found what she had not expected, and the cowboy had quietly called it home. And in that simple truth lay the whole story of their lives together, a story of love and resilience and the power of two people who chose each other, again and again, every single day. The end of one story and the beginning of a legacy that would endure for generations, built on the foundation of love that Hannah and Fletcher had laid together in the dusty, beautiful wilderness of West Texas. They had started with nothing but hope and hard work, and they had built an empire not of wealth but of family, not of power but of love, not of prestige but of home. And that, in the end, was worth more than all the gold in the world.